Meekek17 writes, I don't like Christmas trees because they're like celebrating a pagan Yule festival and have come to symbolize neo-paganism. So I told my family we should dump the tree, and they, of course, said no. I would say good for them. The Yule log is far post-Christian. It actually comes out of Christianity. I want to show you something here. Mother and child. That's depicted across every pagan culture. Even the title Queen of Heaven appears in the Bible as something pagan, right? And the artwork of the early Christians was a Romanized form of Egyptian art. The reason why angels have wings is because of Mercury, the messenger, because angel just means messenger. All right, we have the cherubim and seraphim, which are creatures. But the Yule log was a German tradition that came long after their Christianization. The link given to the website, thelivingmoon.com, and says the ancient tree of life. Tree of life is almost exclusively from the biblical text. There's nothing older than that. The Yule tree is a pagan symbol of life. Usually that was the sun in the springtime, and this would happen around springtime. And even again, the bunnies and rabbits and eggs came in after paganism had died out. It was because Pascha, or Easter as it gets called, is a spring holiday. And sometimes people try to conflate, Easter, that's why. Oeste was an Anglo-Saxon goddess, and Pascha was already, which means Passover, but in Greek, was already being practiced before the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes came across from Denmark and Frisia and Saxony and settled in England, or settled in Britain, making it England, and changing their gods' names a little bit. Yule tree goes back to pagan tradition. Generally, we're outdoor live trees decorated with hanging candles. Citation needed for all this. The Yule tree and ornaments symbolize the sun, the moon, and the stars. Citation needed for all of this. It was Martin Luther, as the commenter mentioned, that made it very popular. And it did signify the light of Christ coming back into the world, the tree of life. That's why New Year's Day was March 25th, more natural New Year's Day. So no, the Christmas tree. Taking St. Nicholas Day, and a man who actually historically would put coal and foods and stuff in people's shoes, because people left their shoes outside where he was from. He was from Smyrna, modern day Turkey. That got blended. That wound up becoming our tradition of stockings, and people stopped celebrating St. Nicholas Day during the 50s and 60s. Some carried it on to the 80s. Some practice it still today. And then you have St. Nick being bastardized into Santa Claus, which is silly, but there really was a St. Nick. He actually stood up at the Council of Nicaea. And even some of these dates are wrong. The cosmic tree. Note, the following Christian viewpoint, you can read first the article here and see how it's explained in context for the purpose. We may merely wish the true origin of Christmas tree is the Yule tree, as pagans have considered the world tree or the tree of life. The tree of life comes from the Bible, and it's expanded on in Christian and Jewish lore, like the Kabbalah and the Zohar, and extra biblical things. I mean, the explorers were looking for the Holy Grail, the fountain of youth, and the tree of life. That's a lot of the early Spanish explorers were looking for those things, and those were specifically Christian. You could say man is naturally pagan, so that there's always adoption of a mother spirituality, like the Virgin Mary or whatnot, and it being aligned with the winter solstice. I think all the movies debunking Zeitgeist got it right. I mean, Zeitgeist is probably one of the most debunked things. Non-Christian origins of Christmas. Encyclopedia Britannica 1949 says, and then it goes 1946, 1913. You might as well quote Edward Gibbon. I'm not trying to belittle you, McKeck 17. I just think the sources are poor. This is before we uncovered wealth of knowledge. Synchronism with Mithraism. Mithraism was later than Christianity. And celebrating on December 25th. Again, you'd have to. That's only in the new calendar. Again, the celebration really wasn't until 12 days after. That's why still in some places that are, pretty much pre-Vatican II have Three Kings Day, the Epiphany or Theophany. That's when the gifts are really given. Yeah, you're right. Around Clement of Alexandria, we didn't really know when it was, and it wasn't Christ Mass. That's a bastardization into English by Anglo-Saxon. It was called the Nativity of our Lord and God according to the flesh, like in Spanish, Navidad, the Nativity. And Cyprian, who lived much later than Clement of Alexandria, placed it in March. He actually placed it on March 25th, the beginning of the year. And you say when the church fathers in AD 340 decided on the date, they didn't. It wasn't decided like that. The church fathers are already, the ante-Nicene fathers are already gone. These would have been bishops. They wouldn't have been considered church fathers at all. And if so, which ones and where are their names? Synchronism with Mithraism. No, Mithraism it was already died out and trying to absorb as much Christianity as it could. It was the establishment of the Roman Catholic Church. No, the Roman Catholic Church you're thinking of in the Middle Ages did not exist back then. Rome was a backwater and actually had no power. It was Constantinople and then Alexandria that held the power. If any city in the West had any power, it was Ravenna, Italy. But no, this is the reason why we see the Victorians. This is all Protestant stuff because it's from Martin Luther. Jeremiah talks about not decorating a tree because there was a pagan festival. Hymns and carols. The denigration of these plays occurred diffusion of Noel, pastorally carols, which was accorded to by the times of quasi-liturgical proposition. Prudentus in the 4th century, first of all, this century, in that century alone, to him the nativity, vox clara, hymn. No, there's much older hymns going about the the nativity before this. It's provable. And you give a date of the 13th to the 14th century. That's just not true. I mean, pagan customs centering around January. Yeah. Again, they didn't know. They didn't have a lot of access to a lot of the early writings. You know, 100 years ago, and then also well over 100 years ago in the Victorian era. So I would love to speak with you, but this is a lot of this is just you've been misled. It's not a symbol of neo-paganism or ancient paganism. All right, peace to you, and a Merry Christmas to you. And I'm also going to be celebrating St. Nicholas Day and Theophany or Epiphany, also known as Three Kings Day.